In Victoria, the emergency response system is in crisis. 12 people, including 4 children, have died since October last year after desperate calls to 000 went unanswered or were picked up too late. In one case, a 2-year-old boy was found face down in a public pool, but it took almost 6 minutes for the 000 call to connect with operators. Matthew Guy is Victoria's opposition leader and he joins me now. Matthew, this is just a situation that is too difficult to comprehend. How has it come about, and will the extra money allocated to this service fix it?
Well, the first question is the most important question, and that is how on earth has this come about? After a focus on the health system for the last 2 years, we've now got a hospital system in crisis in Victoria. We've got an ambulance system in crisis. We've got a dispatch system which, as you've mentioned, has led to some incredibly tragic situations of children dying. In the last 6 months, 12 people have died in Victoria just simply waiting for an ambulance. The government's announced what seems an extraordinary amount of money for just 100 extra people, but that will still take months and months and months. In the meantime, the simple question of, well, what do Victorians do if the dispatch system doesn't answer and they need an ambulance? No one in the government can answer. The only thing I can say is the government needs to bring in extra resources like it did during COVID from interstate to immediately start to man some of the peak demand that we have in the ambulance dispatch system.
Has this become
an unfathomable situation?
It is exactly unfathomable. I'm wondering whether it's become too bureaucratic or there's too much technology involved, because you would have thought in this situation, at the very least, you just have to have enough people there to answer a 000 call immediately comes in. I think the standard is within 5 seconds, yet often it's taken more than 5 minutes.
90% within 5 seconds is the target, and what we're seeing is that that's frequently below 70% on many days. So simple point is, if more people are needed, then go and get some from the excess supply, which we did during COVID, from interstate to assist us. But for God's sake, don't make excuses and give Victorians an answer as to, well, what do you want us to do if the emergency service system doesn't answer? The ministers, 2 ministers, one of them being the Deputy Premier, were asked today. They had no response.
It's a frightening situation. You're going to see people just making the choice to head to the hospital casualty sections themselves. They've got to fix it like yesterday. I just want to, while I've got you, Matthew, get you on a couple of other issues. One is Ukraine. You have a strong family connection to Ukraine. You'd understand, of course, the strategic and diplomatic problems here, but do you believe the West is doing enough to support the people of Ukraine?
Well, my mum's family is from the east, from the second largest city, Kharkiv. Most of them actually just south of the city, about 70, 80 kilometres south of the city. And, you know, it's horrendously frightening. We lost contact with one of the family groups. So I hope and suspect they're in the subway taking shelter. I heard your comments and some of the presentation before from President Joe Biden. I mean, you know, if you vacate the space of supporting democracies through diplomatic and military pressure on dictatorships like Russia and China, then, well, they're going to test you out, aren't they? And that's what they're doing in this circumstance. And all of us with a Ukrainian background know, through what's called the Captive Nations Council, which are places and communities like Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, we know that what comes next. And the Finns know what comes next. And the countries that border Russia, the Georgians, know what comes next. What comes next is a dictator in Putin is out of control. And particularly Europe, but the US as well, of not being caught asleep, because we've all seen what's coming. We've all known what's coming, but they're just unwilling to do much about it. Now, you know, Germany can send helmets to Ukraine. They don't need helmets. You won't remove Vladimir Putin by military helmets. You'll remove them through weapons.
Yeah, and a great hope is the Russian people, some of whom have been brave enough to raise objections in their own country, but it's a tragic situation. I want to go on to the personal tragedy of Shane Warne, because as a prominent Victorian, you would know that perhaps you could nominate Kylie Minogue as well, but certainly those two would be the 2 most famous Victorians on the planet. And this is just such a shock to everybody who follows cricket around the world, but especially to Victorians.
Look, I think most people are just having trouble actually realising the reality of it. I mean, he's so young. He's just so full of life. And he just, as you said, encapsulates so much about not just Victoria, but Australia. And love him or dislike him. You know, he had such a great personality with such a presence, and I'm still stunned. I'm still absolutely stunned. You know, he's just not just a sportsman, but such an entertainer on the cricket pitch, and I can't imagine sport in Melbourne without references to Shane Warne every summer. I mean, I find it unfathomable. I saw the offer of a state funeral. That's absolutely fitting. But at the end of the day, he's also a father. He's a brother. He's a son. And, you know, it is just terrible to think what his family would be going through at this circumstance as well. But, you know, 7 million Victorians grieve along with 23 million Australians for the loss of I would say, the loss of one of our greatest sporting sons.
Yeah, they do indeed. Thanks for joining us, Matthew.
Pleasure, thank you.
Matthew Guy there, the Victorian Liberal leader, opposition leader. The latest news I've seen is there'll be a public memorial ceremony. That might take a couple of weeks to put together. There'll be a private family funeral before that.